The night is cold, the night is young. Every time that I record a live stream, my monitor on the screen shows that I'm going into the yellow, but when I play it back, it's always quieter than I want it to be. And I don't know why that is, if that's the program or what. Hello, this is Benjamin Boyce, and welcome to an evening of briefly checking in, saying hi. I had a little bit of time to kill, and I didn't know how things are going with everybody else. This has been a really busy week. I did a lot of talking, but not a lot of video producing. I was featured. No, it feels like I did interviews every day this week, and yet I have nothing to show for it. Well, no, I do. I have two programs that are in the wings. Spoke with Vocal Distance, who is known on Twitter as Vocal Distance. And I also spoke with James Lindsay, known on Twitter as James Lindsay, or Conceptual James. And we spoke last night for about 3 hours. And for some reason, I'm now on the third rendering of that Skype call. And it keeps on getting hitched. It keeps on getting to like an hour left. Like this is going to be done in about an hour, and then 3 hours later, it's like this is going to be done in about an hour. And then there was a power outage last night, so I fiddled around with the program that I used to record it, and now I'm rendering it for a third time. That was supposed to be the evening with you guys. I was going to live stream me editing that and playing video games while it was playing, and then I just make little markers about things that I could kind of edit out, because it is a 3-hour live stream, and I think it can be distilled somewhat. I thought it would be fun to give people who hopped on the live stream, who were live and resting their antennae upon the razor's edge of YouTube content. They get the full, unabridged version with a little picture of me in the corner, concentrating on something else and listening along and, poking in with the chat. But that didn't happen, alas, because it's still rendering. Hello, ampersand, Miles, Ellen, Gina, and Bill Berry. Gina says, when will that video be up on YouTube? I was just saying about that. So hopefully tomorrow. But now that it's taken 3 times for me to render it, I will watch the whole thing, edit it down, and I love the guy, but Vocal has this tendency to not really understand that I don't want to go through and edit things. So he makes all these references, expecting me to spend all the time digging up his references and putting them on the screen. So I'm just going to have to do that now. And I've talked to him about this, but it's just how his brain works. He's a brilliant, brilliant brother. And that's how it works. Cersei brings up, did you hear about Joe Biden ending women's sports? We talked about that last night, and I let James and Vocal, to a certain extent, talk about that. James had some opinions on the equity. So what does Biden do within hours of getting in charge? Mr. Unity President. One, he decommissions this 1776 commission, which is about trying to root the understanding, a patriotic knowing of America into government somehow, and then he disbands, or he cancels Trump's EO, banning racist and sexist training, or explicitly scapegoating training, not CRT specifically, but anything that scapegoats a class, or anything that's explicitly racist or sexist, or anything that divides people up by their identities and assigns these various privilege and oppression scores, which we know is the outpouring of CRT. But if you actually read that executive order that people are calling against CRT that Trump put in this summer as a bid probably to get the centrists and the anti-woke people on his train. And that did work. That got a lot of us on his coattails. Biden strikes that down for some reason. Right? And then he implants this equity proposal or whatever. And it's interesting. So I did an episode on that equity proposal today. I just went through and I read it. And I'm not a lawyer. I don't think I'm going to publish that reading of it, because this is way out of my pay grade, or my knowledge base to actually talk about these things. But I do have problems with the language. They say explicitly, when they define equity, they say that equity is fairness, justice, and, fairness and justice and a couple other things for all individuals, including, and then they list all the identities. So my question is, if it's for all individuals, why would you include specific identities? And my contention is that equity is to divide everybody up by these different metrics, these different categories, and then to pursue an equal outcome, or to try to close the gaps, which is a pursuit of an equal outcome. Now, there is a need. This is really difficult. This is difficult. Now that it's gone out of colleges, now that it's gone way beyond Evergreen, it's really difficult for me to go on, let's say, Facebook and try to explain to people what equity is. It is a signifier. If equality of opportunity is what you want, then why would you talk about equity? If justice is what you want, why would you talk about equity? What is this thing? Why is it called equity? Now, I don't know to what extent Biden will actually implement these, dividing everybody up by their categories, but it will go in to the federal government. And I read through the thing. Eventually, he's just starting a commission. This commission doesn't have any power over any other government agency, though it will go through and look at all the government agencies, all their policies, to see if people are having equal opportunity, and then to propose some solutions. Now, we know what those things will be. They will be what they are. They will be what happened at Evergreen, not the protest. The bureaucratic mechanisms of dividing people by their race, and then assigning different privilege and oppression scores, and then pursuing some form of reparation. That will be implemented like it was at Evergreen, and like it was attempted to be implemented in the Washington state government. And then the COVID crisis came through and kind of took the wind out of the sails of the equity, that equity group, which is, if you look at my reporting on the Washington equity, the Office of Equity, they're total whack jobs, total idealistic, total like really extreme, crazy CRT, all that racial justice rhetoric going on. And I think on the federal level, there will be some form of dialing that down, because you can't have that up on the federal level. And then after they go through, and 6 months later, they're going to make this report, and then they're going to submit it to Biden. And then Biden's going to have his lawyers look at it. And then all the mechanisms of law will look at this and see, this is the big question. This is the big question. Yes, there are disparities within different groups. And yes, some of those disparities come from laws in the past. And those laws perpetuate and echo through time. And there should be some sort of a writing of that. Definitely. However, how should that be affected? And to what degree do we want our federal government acting treating people differently depending on their race? To what degree? What's the limiting principle? What will hold this in check? Now, if we look at how the Democratic Party has been running on the fumes of identity politic, which is turning off actually these marginalized, quote unquote, these minority voters voted more and more for Trump. They are trending Republican. Latinos are trending Republican. I think there will be a surprise and probably very spirited, and I think very inspiring black conservative movement. And I'm not talking about like a Candace Owens, kind of playing that grifter role up there. I think an honest to goodness, dyed in the wool, American conservative black contingent that will actually lead the party. I think there will be these Latino leaders. I think that the multiracialism of America, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's actually pretty awesome. But I think that there does need to be some sort of, acknowledgement and work done to make a multi-ethnic, multiracial, conservative party that will balance out the multi-ethnic, multicultural liberal party or liberal-sidedness of that, and they can have a dialogue, and we can push the ideologues out of the way. Now, how was I getting on that? We know that the Democrats, well, okay, Biden himself. So he puts out this executive order and says, we want to have fairness and justice and blah, 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 blah for all individuals, including, so there's an asterisk, including, and then they make the progressive stack. Now, a lot of people will say, well, what's wrong with that? Why not just go through and point out all those things? Well, it's putting into government that we're actually looking at people based on their race. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do that. But then Biden says explicitly, it was a couple of months ago or a month ago, I have it saved somewhere, but he said explicitly that in this, Great Reset or this Build Back Better, whatever you want to call it, whatever he calls it, we will prioritize all these different identities. We're going to prioritize all these different identities. So the executive order says that it's for all individuals, including this stuff, but the Biden rhetoric, which is playing to the base, It's playing to the base. And he's got to throw them a bone, So I don't think it's anything to be worried about, but it's something to be prepared for. It's not something to be upset about, but it is something to take seriously. I think there's a way of confronting what that equity thing means and really holding it to account and taking it to task. And that will require, can anybody hear me? Am I getting messages? Hold on a second. I have to check my messages. Okay. Sometimes people message me on Twitter and say, we can't hear you. And then I feel like an idiot. So we need to hold them to account and to very patiently, artfully make the case for a government that's blind. The government is just blind. Maybe it's not blind with regards to class, socioeconomic status. I think that there's a case for that. I think that that's solid because somebody was saying that if it focused on, it was Ayla, if they focused on supporting poor people, then that will support. If most POCs, so called, are poor, then that poor contingent will be lifted up. But it also lift up the whites. Do you want a big contingent of poor white people feeling shafted by their government and also consistently ridiculed by their well-meaning, well-to-do liberal people that look just like them but look down on them and then spit out this whole privilege oppression rhetoric upon the poor white people? All these white liberals going around saying, I'm so holy, all white people are privileged, right? Making themselves feel good, putting everybody else down because those well-to-do liberals can afford to expend their because they can afford to expend their pride because they are gaining status in it. This whole anti-racist thing. Robin DiAngelo perfectly, she concretizes. I'm missing a word here. She perfectly encapsulates this well-to-do white liberal as wanted for nothing in her life, who can flay herself and completely shame herself on stage, and through that gains status. I think that really shows the allure for well-to-do white liberals. And I'm a liberal myself, but I really dislike this kind of hypocrisy. They can take on that shame and then kind of poo-poo those poor white people for whom pride matters. If you are a working class citizen and a poor person, your pride matters. You don't want to go around and say, I'm so sorry for all the sins of everybody else's ancestors. You don't want to do that. The way that society operates on that level is to actually have pride in your heritage, right? So there's a nest of contradictions, and then there's a nest of problems. And it's really difficult to reach so I just shot myself in the foot because we need to reach those people, those well-to-do white liberals, and say, listen, this stuff isn't going to work out how you like it. This equity rhetoric, maybe it's rhetoric, maybe it's not, though. We need to take it seriously. And what is it? What is it? What is it? Let's define it. Let's define it. And the problem with equity, again, is and I've been looking at it for several years now, everybody's got their own kind of wishy-washy definition of it. They use all these other terms: equal opportunity, closing the gaps, justice, and all these other terms. And you're like, well, why do you have equity if you have all these other terms? What do you mean by equity? And then they have a picture of a fence, somebody like poking their head over a fence or something like that and trying to equalize everybody's outcomes or equalize everybody's access. And that can work. That can be good things. And I think it would be better if they concentrated on class instead of dividing us up into race, balkanizing us, and then causing a bunch of racial disharmony. Why do that? Why do that? I guess, and I understand. I understand, and so it's ultimately it's not enough for me to be sitting on the internet and bitching about it. As a white man, my identity is already a hindrance to me. So the thing is, again, find the values. Go into the core values. So I made this equation. I made a definition. I made an explicit definition, and people can disagree with it as they want to do. I'm not Merriam-Webster's, so I can, try to define that definition without having some sort of political backlash going on. I have to wrangle with the politics of this. But equity is equality minus liberty. Equity is equality minus liberty. Equity is a centralized bureaucratic apparatus deciding what is equal that everybody pays into and then follows through. Like they obey the laws that are created. This equalization, this fairness, that's the other word. Fairness. Fairness how? Fairness at the end? Fairness at the beginning? I agree. Equality of outcomes. I believe reforming education, tearing all this activist crap out of our education system and actually giving people really clear paths towards mastery of a freaking career or a craft or something, coding, anything. All this activism needs to go and get away, and then actually reform it. That will do so much better for every marginalized community on a socioeconomic way of divvying it up. Get rid of that and stop crapping on America. Stop crapping on America. America's story is not perfect, but it is a story of triumph and not of shame. And maybe things will change where they won't be promulgating, and I'm talking about the media apparatus of this whole weird kind of all these power junkies up there. This media apparatus, like pushing the 1619 project. Did you see what they did on July 4th of this last year? July 4th, 2020. On Twitter, I saw news organization after news organization spending that day crapping on America. Bloomberg especially spent that day problematizing America. That is the exact opposite thing of what we want to do. We want common pride. We don't want a little contingent of elite people using shame of themselves to make them to gain status and then crapping on everybody else and giving a bunch of reasons for everybody to hate this country. So give them tools to mastery and a common cause. And I'm doubtful that Biden's going to do that. The first hour he's in there, he takes down the 1776 project, and I haven't actually looked at it, but it was like this overture towards patriotism, and I don't necessarily want like some sort of patriotic education, like some sort of nationalist education rammed through kids' heads. I'm not saying that, but we can have a positive, honest accounting of our country and the amazing ideas that formed it. And furthermore, the ideas were imperfect. The ideas were imperfect, but there was something in that mechanism, the Constitution, and all the things attached to that Constitution that allowed it to be upgraded. So why concentrate on these? The origins of these ideas were bad because they're hypocrites and they're slave owners, right? So therefore, because they were enmeshed in their time and the faults of their time, those faults remain through the whole document. Actually, they were taken care of. Actually, the whole story of America is one of triumph. If you have that as the overarching heroic narrative, then everybody's individual interaction with their city, their locality, their city, their state, and the federal government will all be one of triumphing over disparity in your own life, triumphing over your laziness. Let's just break it down. Triumphing over your ignorance. That triumph starts with the individual. and is replicated up and down the entire thing. I think that that's the way. What did Biden do? Comes in, rips out 1776 project within hours, and then he puts in this little equity thing. Now, I don't necessarily think he knows what he's doing, but in general, or with that thing in particular, specifically, he was doing what his proponents, the people who got him in office, the people who worked their asses off to get Trump out and get him in, he's paying them off, right? So it works. We'll see if, like, in the process in the next 6 months, how that will be entrenched into our federal government, into our state government. And because it's the federal government, anything that's getting money from the federal government will also have to obey this. Now, I started speaking about women. What is the other thing he did? Okay, so we get that topic out. Okay, so we talked about the equity bill. I think there's room for debate. I think that there's a way of taking it too seriously, but I think that there's a way of not taking it seriously enough. And there's a fine line, and then being able to communicate that. I think that requires somebody speaking out loud and trying to refine their arguments and having debate with other people about it, figuring that out. But what else did he do? He wanted, what's it called? He did one about gender. He did about equality of gender. And he threw women under the bus. He grabbed them by the EO. That's what he did. They got rid of the implicitly dog-whistling sexist, he very kind of blatantly crude and not respectful towards womankind president of Donald Trump. I don't know exactly how sexist he was, but he said some things, said some things that are a little over to the top and demeaning of women. So that guy, they got rid of the sexist, racist guy. Yeah, I don't see any actual evidence of racism. I see a lot of selfishness, and I see a lot of classism in him, but I don't think he's necessarily a racist guy. They got rid of that guy that they were calling for 4 years sexist and racist, and then they voted in Biden, and within an hour or two, he implements racial stereotyping into government. And what does he do with this sexism thing? I need to look it up. I'm really sorry. I need to look it up. That EO executive order. What's it called? Sexism or gender? Yeah, Biden. I think that's what it is. Executive order preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. Again, okay, so with the equity one, they're like, for all individuals, including all these identities. So they're smuggling identity into that individual. And then when they do all their thing, like when they go through all the statistics, they're not going to be looking at individuals. They will be looking at identity categories. So that it's a warning sign, I'm trying to say. Secondly, gender identity. Okay, read this again. Executive order on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. Gender identity comes first. Sexual orientation, which is a quantifiable thing, more or less. I mean, there's fluidness or whatever. It's like I've talked with these sexologist people, which are really awesome. You check out my my playlist on gender and sexuality if you haven't. But I've talked to a lot of these sexual guys, sex guys, awesome sex researchers. And girls, a lot of dudes, though, a lot of gay dudes, actually. And they say it's really quantifiable whether a male brain is heterosexual or homosexual, okay? So sexual orientation, which is the foundation of gay rights, right? And then sexual discrimination or discrimination based on sex is rooted in the body. It's rooted in the body. The reality is the sex, and the reality is the sexuality. But before that, what's more important than that? Gender identity. What is gender identity? What is gender identity? Now, I have not read through this whole thing. I need to... Definition. Oh, okay. Pardon me for the hitch. Here, I'm looking for the definition of gender identity. And I don't see it. Shoot. So I'm going to have to come back here and really read through it. But this is the line that I did read or look at. It's in the first section. So I'll just read this section 1 policy. Every person should be treated with respect and dignity and should be able to live without fear, no matter who they are or whom they love. I don't think it's the government's job to protect us from fear. I really do think that that's an overreach. I don't want the government protecting me from fear itself. I mean, when they do that, then we pour a bunch of money into the NSA and we create these huge terrorist task force. But fear is just it's like everywhere. Like, how are you going to stop people from being afraid? Okay? I mean, that's kind of overreach. I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic, but the wording itself. Every person should be treated with respect. I agree. And dignity. I agree. And everybody should treat other people with respect and dignity. And if you go around disrespecting people and diminishing their dignity, don't expect people to respect you back or treat you with dignity. It's a two-way street. So everybody should act like that and everybody should be treated like that. I agree with that. And should be able to live free without fear. I don't think that's possible, no matter who they are or whom they love. Children should be able to learn without worrying about whether they will be denied access to the restroom, the locker room, or school sports. I think a lot of people are talking about this specific thing, and I haven't gone through this whole thing, and there's a number of different write-ups. Women's Organization of Liberation Freedom, Wolf, They did a write-up on this, and there's a lot of other sexologists that I want to interview to really talk about this, because basically there is a problem when we destroy or diminish or deteriorate the category of sex. Sex, we are a sexed embodied creature. There's no human being alive who has not participated in being inseminated by a man and produced by a female and gestated by a female. That is a basic fundamental part of our existence, first and foremost. Secondly, there is a whole evolution itself has crafted, and men and women participating in sexy time have crafted a dimorphism that is fluid. It's not exact, and there's a lot of gender non-conforming people, but gender is an expression of sex, by and large. And we have made strides in being more accepting to people who don't fit necessarily into the category of feminine females and masculine males. But it does stack up from there. And the power of male's desire is not to be diminished. You do not overlook the power of a man to get what he wants when he's horny. We have crafted culturally. Okay, so biology informed the male to be really horny, and females too, but the power of the male to be very obsessive about females to try to get some it's a part of the biology. It's something that animates the man. And then there's a bunch of mechanisms that culturally we have put in place to guard or to diminish or to delay or defer that direct animalistic desire. And part of those different processes, which are, stereotypical, like the 50s, like, or different codes of conduct, such as chivalry, which is a very refined attempt to regulate the desire of the male and the force of the male, and then to regulate and to produce the beauty and the attractiveness and the power, the subtle power of the female, and to try to constellate those two things in a generative, productive relationship. That's on a cultural level, on just attitudes. But way before that, just basics. We separate spaces where the genitals are whipped out. Why? Is it because we don't like genitals? Is it because purely of shame? Or could it be that a male exposed to a naked female will shut down, his brain will shut down, and he will become an object of desire? Now, you can have nudist communities, we can go into those whole things, but just on a basic, to scale up society where you have a bunch of strangers interacting, we just basically separate the sexes when they're dealing with those private parts. And we have the right to privacy. Okay, so that's my basic argument. I can refine it, but listen to the words of this one sentence. Children should be able to learn without worrying about whether they will be denied access to the restroom, the locker room, or school sports. It doesn't say anything about which restroom, which locker room, or which school sports, the ones that they choose or the ones that they are assigned based on their biology. Right? No child in the United States, or if a child in the United States is being denied access to the restroom, there's something going on. And they should definitely, and that should definitely be looked at. And there should, that's basically child abuse. Nobody is denying anybody access to the restroom. There's just a basic separation of the sexes, a basic discrimination between male bodies and female bodies to separate them, to diminish the likelihood of something going awry. Men have a very strong sex drive. I know we don't like to talk about it, and I know it's probably uncouth to say. Men have a very strong sex drive, and they typically have a stronger physical physique than females. So it's basic security to just mitigate instances where women are vulnerable and where men are having access to that vulnerability. And there's nothing wrong about that. That's just how it works out when you scale it up. So this policy, and I haven't gone through the whole thing, but this policy, Executive Order on Prevention and Combating Discrimination on the Basis of Gender Identity or Sexual Orientation, it confuses, or it's disingenuous in the third sentence. And the second sentence of the actual policy. Children should be able to learn without worrying about whether they will be denied access to the restrooms, the locker room, or school sports. Now, I tend to agree that with the gender critical and females in general, there's a big outcry. This is really interesting. There was a huge outcry yesterday on Twitter. And Twitter, like the hashtag Biden erases women got boosted up. It got boosted up really quick. And right behind it, right on its tails, was this TERFs hashtag. So if you don't know how Twitter works, Twitter is just a bunch of sentences floating around. You can use these things called hashtags, and the hashtags kind of clump up all the ideas under these different topics. And out of nowhere, this Biden erases women thing came along, and then TERFs came on after it. And that, in that dialogue, which has been going on for years and now is being taken to the next level, the federal level, and being brought out into the public, there has been this radical trans rights activist attitude of attacking these things that they call TERFs, these females who are trying to defend female rights. Now, not everybody on either side is good or bad. There's some good communicators. There's some bad communicators. There's some traumatized people who are working out trauma in this dialogue. And there's some people who are just mean and angry on both sides. So it's not a pretty discourse. It's actually really complex. And I've spent a couple years, you guys have seen me, I've spent a couple years investigating this thing and trying to attack it in a different way than it happens on Twitter. In Twitter sphere, it's ugly. And it's really ugly because it really shows a whole lot of misogyny. It is a very ugly thing. It's a very ugly thing how females are treated in this topic. And it's happened where Reddit boots these women out. It's just like they're constantly being discriminated against. Twitter comes along and it's like, oh no, this is going to go public. So they start describing it in their like little tone of, we're not editors, but we're going to like try to describe what this is about. And they said some women are complaining about Biden erasing biologically born women. And then others accusing them of transphobia. And it was weird how they phrased that. It was really weird how they phrased that. And then Twitter erased. So the first explanation was women are, trying to stop or accusing Biden of erasing biologically born women. Twitter erases biologically born women. So they actually do what they say the women are saying that is happening to them. They erase biologically born women, whatever that means, and they replace it with cisgender. And they take the side, implicitly, they take the side of the radical trans rights activists. They're not fair at all. And they changed the language several times. And then today, it was really interesting. Today, that hashtag wasn't around and trending anymore. And instead, they forwarded this hashtag about Roe v. Wade, about abortion. So it seemed like today, they're trying to erase that from the mind. They don't want the public at large to see what's going on in this discourse and then the outcomes of this discourse, which are very profound. It's not a light topic, and it needs to be spoken about in an adult way. aside from all that arguing, aside from all that politicking and all that activism, really in an adult way show how starting to fiddle around with children's notions of gender leads a large portion of vulnerable children, whether mentally on an autistic level. They take up these ideas of gender categories and they do this calculus and they say, well, I guess I'm a boy or I guess I'm a girl. There's a high there's a high contingent of these early transitioners or these ROGD individuals who don't have persistent from childhood persistent, insistent, and consistent gender dysphoria, but they are presented with this really weird, twisted, and I've gone into this and I'm not doing it justice because I've spent 2 years trying to say that there's something here. But once you start fiddling around with children's notion of gender, more than is necessary, more medicalization happens than is necessary. It's not good. You're putting females and males in compromising positions as children. You're allowing them to go along. And I'm sorry to say this, and I really respect people who have transitioned, but it is a psychological condition. It is not a good place to be caught in a state where you are warring with your own body. And to such an extent that the only way to do that is to start to medicalize yourself and then use surgery to recraft your body. It is not a light topic whatsoever. Within hours of gaining power, Biden lies. And he says that children should be able to learn without worrying about whether they will be denied access to the restroom, the locker room, or school sports. That will negatively affect mostly females in a certain extent. And the most concrete way that we can all see, it's very evident, is in sports. But there's a whole lot of very nuanced, very not apparent, not directly apparent consequences to feeding into, to instituting this single mental discomfort with one's body, implementing that into law and discouraging any questioning of that and calling every questioning of that discrimination and vilifying that and then legalizing any sort of pushback, any sort of critical contest with this from the couch, from the psychologist's couch into the public sphere to cast all criticism as discrimination. He's playing with fire. I don't think he understands this. I don't think he necessarily understands this, but this is coming down the pipes, guys. This is bigger than the race thing. It's bigger than the race thing because it will, if not kept in check, if not restrained to a very small minority of people who have persistent, consistent, and insistent discomfort with their bodies, specifically in a gender way. Everybody's got problems with their body. If not constrained, if allowed to persist under the banner of inclusion, under the banner of anti-bullying and anti-discrimination, it will sterilize thousands of people. It will decimate the lives. It will literally decimate the communities of LGB and autistic spectrum individuals or persons with autism, persons with varying sexualities. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And within hours, Biden puts that up. Mr. Unity Party. So we don't know to what extent this is actually going to work out because I've heard, and I haven't done super amounts of research on this, but I've heard that this particular executive order was already struck down by the federal court. But I've heard rumors that Biden's going to, the Senate, the Congress, the Senate, the House, and Biden are going to rip apart our federal government, the judges, and install their own or boost the courts or whatever, they stack the court or whatever. So we'll see how it works out legally, but legally is our best path culturally towards making this a adult conversation. First and foremost, if you want to help out on this, have very patient adult conversations, find good voices, find good interviews. I'm not the best representative of this, but I think I've had some really good interviews, but find good resources and share them with everybody that you know, to question this. And also, if you can, support people who are attacking this legally. It's phenomenally. It's not just this. It's not just the new gay rights. It's not just the new gay rights. It's another level. This is another level. This is, to be gay, you don't need to be on medicine and cut off your genitalia or your breasts to be gay. There's no part of being gay that has to do with relying for the rest of your life on the medical establishment. The trans issue, so there's this non-binary issue and people who want to play around with that, whatever, but it does have the tendency to lead people towards a path that they don't necessarily need to be on. Now, the people who do take that path should absolutely be respected. If people go halfway down that path and turn around, everybody should be respected. I'm not preaching disrespect, but I don't think putting these ideas into the heads of the children is it's child abuse. It's not proper. It's not proper. It's not proper to popularize this thing and then to put the whole weight of anti-discrimination and the civil rights rhetoric of overcoming segregation or whatever behind this thing to affect this cause that in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, how are people going to look back on this? What side of history is this really, really, really on? I don't know. I don't particularly like that rhetoric, but I see that rhetoric being used to forward this. And it's not right. It's not right. It's not right. So I don't think I spoiled the episode with James Lindsay and Vocal Distance that I will be trying to publish tomorrow, if the rendering software allowed, because I don't really talk in my interviews. I let them talk, but that's my thoughts on those things. I'm glad that you guys showed up for that. And I spent 40 minutes talking. So now I'm going to relax and I will put this on the live stream archive. I'll let this stay up for a day and then I'll unlist it, put it on the live stream archive. I'll go back and I'll listen to it and edit it down and make it into a proper video on my channel if it stands up to the, to second thought or to feedback. There's a lot more to be said on this, and I've been reading a lot of people responding to this, and just the women's in sports issue. This is why I spent 2 years on this thing. I can't put it all together. I'm not ready to write the book on it, but like this is a huge issue. The race thing's a big issue. This equity thing is a big issue, and I think I see the way forward is to build coalitions with people, multi-ethnic, multi-racial. Coalitions of people based on values that are different, disparate than this government apparatus that's going to start fiddling around with fairness and getting their grimy freaking bureaucratic hands into our business. I think there's a better way of going about lifting up our communities that doesn't involve, well, the Democrats and their freaking identity politics, but also just doesn't involve the government in general or really tamps down on that and makes the government completely blind to anything other than socioeconomic status. And even then, with tremendous amounts of oversight, because they start fiddling around. They don't really know what they're doing. They're a bunch of experts, but they don't understand how things scale. So I'm not saying that Biden's a communist. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying equity, this equity thing is the end all be all and the death of America. It's not that. It's not that. But these two things really do show me that I was not wrong by saying that that Biden is the George Bridges administration. Now, George Bridges on the level of Evergreen, and then George Bridges on the level of Washington, which would be Inslee, and George Bridges on the level of the federal government. Things will play out differently in each domain because it's kind of watered down and the power works differently and the way that things operate work differently on all these different levels. So I'm not saying that there will be complete parity between Evergreen and the federal government. And by Evergreen, I'm not talking about the protest. I'm talking about the administrative side that allowed the protest to happen in order to get their way. Kind of like some people allowed and minimized and even supported or bailed out people who participated in last year's riots could be said to maybe have used those things to gain power. Maybe. If you look at it in a certain way and you don't mind having false equivalency thrown at you or whataboutism or whatever. There's a lot of similarities, but they're not completely the same. And therefore, our attention shouldn't be so triggered and focused on chaotic events, such as what happened at the Capitol. Yes, it's bad, it's good, whatever, let the law deal with it. But and also the protests that are going on and any amount of stuff that we saw in the last 4 years that was really troubling, worrying, really heighten your anxiety. We all need, in order to forward a adult conversation and therefore an adult country, need to kind of step back from the emotionality, I mean, it's fun to be rhetorical. It's fun to have hyperbole. I understand that. I'm not telling you how to act. I'm talking to myself right now. I'm not going to tell myself how to act. But there's a way to go about doing that without overreacting to this. And I'm trying to be fair-minded, but I am essentially critical of Biden. And he proved me right. He proved me right. I'm not saying he's not better than Trump. Hopefully, people will let go of their freaking insane takes on Trump, whether justified or not. Hopefully, people's emotionality around Trump will diminish in order for good conversations to happen. I told you guys I would stop talking, and so I will by taking a drink of this whiskey sour. So I have a rye and honey that I poured honey and boiling water together in a half and half ratio for the sweetener. And then I have a Meyer lemon, which are in season right now. Do get them. They're kind of like kind of associated with the tangerine, but they're still a lemon. And then fizzy water and some cherries. And I can't remember the brand of the cherry, but also some bitters. And I think you pronounce the bitters Angostura. In the original incarnation, it was too sweet, so I watered it down by half, turned it from a cocktail into some sort of spritzer. Bodhi is doing okay. I will have to go in 15 minutes and cook dinner. So we're on the clock, guys, and I really mean it this time. Say less, and someday maybe we'll have a voice conversation, or you will figure out how to find my email, and you'll send me a little audio file with your name on it or in it, and I will be able to pronounce correctly your name. Sayla says, Benjamin, how's Bodhi doing? Bodhi is also known as Tofu by one person, I think, on my channel, or maybe 2 or 3 people. They call him Bodhi every time I see him. He's doing good. I do have a video to make that's non-political that I should make that I've been putting off, but Bodhi's really good. He's been collecting leaves and bark. He brings them in, and I've been kind of saving them on the mantle. But it's weird. I've never had a cat go through there. So I have some footage of him selecting which leaf, and I have footage of the leaves themselves. But then he discovered the pleasures of the hunt. Bodhi has discovered the pleasures of the hunt. By that I mean he brings in critters and tosses them around until they die, and then continues to toss them around. And he has this very cute little purr or growl that he gives you when you try to take him away and throw him in the trash, because you don't want to step on a disemboweled mouse first thing in the morning, or you don't want a mouse hid under the couch and they have to deal with that smell and then finally figure out what's going on. You have to throw the thing away when it's fresh in your mind and also fresh in his maw. And he does this really cute. He's doing really good, though. He's entering some sort of mid-level phase of what's it called? Adolescent phase. Very, very sporty. He likes playing soccer. He'll play soccer and basketball with himself, where he'll take an object and he'll find some way to put it on a hoop or bat it back and forth. And he's very, very sporty. But he was very, very pacifistic until this past week, when we've discovered him several times interacting with critters that he's clawed into the house. Gonna do a couple super chats here. Yeah, boy, Big T says, finally caught you live, Ben. Watching since Evergreen. Love your videos. Keep up the great work. Get back on the PSA Sitch and Adam Friended show. I should do that. I should reach out. I don't like inviting myself places, but I think Adam likes me, and PSA Sitch doesn't mind me. So I'll just say I can show up, but I can't do those 8-hour freaking live streams. I'm not Sargon of Akkad. I'm not Joe Rogan. I have a very limited sphere of concentrated discourse, after which point I start just doing random word association. My brain just starts fizzing out, and I go into preschool land where I just start writing nursery rhymes and telling stories about little holes in the ground that have this mushy sides in it that if you ever poke will start to screech on the other side of the playing field. But it's cool if you can tickle it in just the right way. This hole will produce a song under the window of the 2nd grade classroom, and you can actually cause the teacher to teach things that she shouldn't teach, like magic, rainbow darkness. So if you tickle this little hole on the other side of the playground, you can actually teach second graders magic darkness powers of rainbow shimmeringness. And you don't want to do that because if they gain those powers, they will run roughshod over the school, and the rainbows of darkness will, gain ascendancy over the minds and the imaginations of people from the lowest to the highest, and then society will be ruined. So be very, very careful with how you tickle that hole with the soft sides outside. So, that's the kind of thing that you just start popping out there. And people are like, what the heck are you talking about? I can't listen to this anymore. I'm tuning out. Especially, it's one thing for me to do that on my channel, but like in the middle of a 6-hour live stream with like Tim freaking Poole or something, like Justin Murphy. I was like, oh, your Tucker Carlson's coming on. Hey, Tucker, I'll talk about your Tucker, dude, and like, I'll just get into that thing. So I have to, have some restraint. Michael O, Super Chat, $20. I like you. Have some money. Thank you, dude. Really appreciate that tip. Really appreciate being able to provide this type of content for you guys and diversify my earnings in such a degree that I can continue to provide this stuff and try to start planning on a deeper level. I'm trying to get to a deeper level, to let go of the criticism and try to get into something deeper. So my content or my output, it might be a little dicey for the next couple months. It might be a little dicey because I really want to concentrate on the foundations of America. What the heck are we doing here, guys? Where did we come from? Where are we going? And do that a little bit more intentionally than I have been by just reacting. So Super Chat, Andrew B, $5 USD. Good news is I no longer fear an asteroid hitting the Earth. Andrew B is distracted, and that sometimes is a very, very, very good thing. I'm going to take one more drink. I just have to say how much pleasure I find in my first Portland roommate, my first actual like bona fide Portland roommate back from 2000, the year 2000, maybe 2001. She always shows up to my live streams. I never see I never see her commenting on my videos, but Una, here's to you, girl. We had fun times going to alien like meetups where people talk about aliens and show footage of aliens and other things. We had a wild time way back in the day. I'm going to go in about 8 minutes. I play around with this thing and then it goes all out of the way. Oh, shoot. Okay, let's do it like this. Common Cure, Super Chat, $10. Thank you very much. Should I be saying? I don't know how other people do that. Do they say like the amount? Is that good? Is that a turn on? Is that a turn off? I don't know. You guys tell me in the comments below. How does a relatively small demographic of woke ideologues complain about threats to democracy, yet are able to influence legislation on the federal level? Doesn't sound very democratic to me. Common Cure, that is an excellent question. And I do say that my conversation with James Lindsay and Vocal Distance that I recorded last night and have been having problems trying to post all day long today, and hopefully it'll be out tomorrow. If it doesn't render, I'm just going to have to record the screen of the screen recording software playing it and then like have a second screen recording. It's a headache, but we do get into that. The methodology of wokeness and how it is able, with very small, very intentional and disciplined individuals, take over entire organizations. We get into that. It's a very good question. Why is the minority, and we're not talking about minorities in the sense of class, but a minority of ideologues, a minority of people who are very radical in a particular way, able to influence the highest office in the land? Well, first, they start out in the knitting community, and then they start out on the streets of Portland or some college in the middle of nowhere, and then they just scale up. They just scale up. Like, oh, look, it's finally happening. They also spent years putting in this place. The stuff that we're seeing now has been years in coming. Just like when George W. Bush went and did all that Iraq bullshit and whatever Cheney was doing in the corner. Just like that, there was no way to stop it once it started because it had already been in place since Nixon and before Nixon. There was the outgrowth of something 20 years before. There's no way to stop it. That is the same thing that's happening now. There's no way to stop that. We're riding the wave, but we can ride it smartly. and direct how it carries us. We do have control, but the surge is on. Does that make sense? Super chat, the Blizzard. Lovely hat, girl. Friendly girl. The Blizzard, being female, oppresses the blue hair people. Magic Sparkle time. Blizzard, you look fun. I'm going to try to remember and look up your channel, see if you have any chatty videos, because that'd be fun. Oh, Michael didn't like me talking about my dumb drink. Make a difference. We believe in you. Sorry. I need to water down my chatting about political issues with something as passé as a evening cocktail on a Friday night. 5 minutes. I got to go. Super chat, CA, Canada, $5. From Avalon C. Please interview John Michael Greer about politics and religion. John Michael Greer. That would be amazing. I will look into that. You know, it's weird. This is weird. So I look at myself. I'm always watching myself and seeing how I act. You know, I'm like kind of pissy and short. I get short. I have a like narrow. Like I'm very jealous of my time. And I don't like distractions. I don't like loud noises. You know, like I get really pissy. I get really pissy. But I hardly ever put that on camera. So you guys, I was thinking, like, people probably think I'm a really nice guy, but I struggle to be nice. I really struggle at it. It's interesting. It's interesting to have like this very weird kind of persona that's built out of people watching me do certain things in certain ways at certain times in film, you know, but like there's all this other side of myself. It's nice to have a distance between what people see of me and me, but that distance is interesting. So I was thinking people probably think I'm a nice guy. Like I actually, you know what? I might be a nice guy insofar as I only put myself in positions publicly where I am nice. So I only put the nice thing first. I was also thinking about how anxious I was because I read that equity thing in my ASMR voice, which some people like, some people don't. But I was just like doing this very gentle bathrobe reading of this document that might be, come to be the beginning of the end of America as we know it. But I was just reading through it in a very calm voice, and doing some of my like flamboyant, calm voice things that I can't do right now because I'm not on that mood. But I was thinking about that because I go through life with so much anxiety. Like I'm so anxious. Like basically that's why I started this live stream. Because I'm like, if I talk, even to nobody in particular, I guess I'm talking to everybody in general, nobody in particular, but even doing that, I will get away from that anxiety. It's always there. And yet I present a calm facade. Or if I go back, and I was thinking through that, I'm like, why do I try to present really calm content if I'm really anxious all the time and really kind of like basically on edge all the time? Unless I'm focusing on something. And I was thinking, well, when I listen to myself again, when I finish the video or when I'm editing the video or when I go through and I listen to it or watch it while people are doing that live, like when you play it live, you pre-record it, there's some word for it, whatever. People get on the comments. But if I listen to it again and it makes me anxious, I don't want to put that out in the world. I don't want to put my anxiety out in that world because I get really anxious out of very anxious things. I don't want to perpetuate that. So I create or produce things that are the opposite of what I feel so I don't have to feel that thing when I go through and I listen to them. I was just thinking about that. It's just interesting. People are interesting. Jordan Smith, I love your photo too. I'm sorry to comment on photos. I shouldn't do that. It's very wrong. Like your photo though. You try to provide others, Jordan Smith says, you try to provide others what you desire for yourself, maybe. In a way. Try to give people things. I try to avoid being embarrassed. And that's the thing. You're like, well, I don't want other people to be embarrassed by their behavior, but do you guys see how you're acting? And maybe you should be a little bit embarrassed about that. But I cringed. Like I was like creating this drink. I thought of something from 23 years ago. I thought about something from 17 years ago, and like my whole body just like that I did that was stupid and embarrassing, and my whole body like crumbled up, and I'm like, nothing's good. Like I just like start going into this downward spiral of nihilism while I'm creating this drink. And I'm like, no, no, you're not. That is your imagination. That is your imagination. You're just thinking of something in order to feel things, and it's really easy to feel negative, and you have all these memories that you can use to feel negative when you just want a feeling. You just want to feel, you're just you're feeling up time. And you're doing it negatively because the negative option's right there. I actually didn't think about that until just now. So I don't know if that's good or not. But now we're just doing self-reflective time, which is narcissistic. It will be cut out of the final draft of this little discourse with my friends, my dark friends, my friends who I don't know. Like everybody in general and no one in particular, but you're all somebodies. You're all somebodies. You're all somebodies. I'm being somebody. You guys can look at the somebody in me. Some sort of weird identity math in this stuff. This stuff is dangerous stuff. I mean, this whole becoming a media thing in your house thing. Like if everybody's a media star, who's real anymore? Super chat $10. Don't know if I should say the amount or that it's a super chat, but I'm reading it. Super chat $10 from Matt24002. I hope you take a look at Mark Knoll's work if you look at the role of religion in American politics. I want to be able to erect a very, very deft argument for religion on a certain level, not for individuals. I think that individuals can exist apart from religion or within a religion. I think a society needs a religion, and if it doesn't have one, it will create one. So the question is, to what degree is our entire framework as Americans based on a religion being there? And it was. It was in the beginning when people came over, especially in the northern parts, northeastern United States, they were very religious. And the stuff that built into and created the United States, there's a lot of assumptions about people having a common morality that is syncretized. Religion syncretizes people's feelings. It syncretizes their judgment of what's right and wrong. It syncretizes them bodily. It brings them together bodily. I think that there's this other aspect that's transcendent, this astral thing or this super conscious thing, but we can forget about that. We don't have to talk about that. Every once in a while, I like to have people on that talk about that because it's real. And when you feel that power of life surging through, you can't say it's not real anymore, but you can just completely forget that that's there, but you can say that religion has certain benefits on a societal level. So if we want to be ahead of the curve of society coming together in these intense ways as a community, if we want to put programming in place for them to act towards a beneficent cause, not a pseudo-beneficent cause such as Marxism would be, or such as communism would be, and I'm not saying that I'm just as an example. There are these secular religions that promise the good, promise the escape from the bad, that end up doing nothing but bad and never fulfilling their good. In order to get ahead of that, you need a good story. You need a good story. You need a good story. You need something that constellates that information, that synchronizes everybody's outlook with wiggle room, synchronizes our judgment of what's right and wrong, and then gives us a motivation to work the hell out of life, to do the absolute maximum to make something awesome in the world. Make something awesome in the world. Right? I think that there's room to start to make a coalition of people, even atheists, who just admit, social justice is a religion and it have infected our community very severely. So there are a certain number of people who need that. And we need to provide that. But we also need to provide wiggle room for free thinkers and people to not agree with everybody, but still sync up and participate. Just tithe a little bit of their attention into these stories, into these rituals, into these holidays that synchronize all of society. James Lindsay talks about a American religion. I don't think that's necessarily going to work, but there's something there. There's something there. And like I said for years, that's ultimately the goal of this channel, is to go in that direction. But I have to do it with everybody on board. And I appreciate people who vomit in their mouth whenever somebody talks about their spiritual experience. I appreciate you guys. I understand that you don't want to hear that. I understand your revulsion to that. I understand everybody who had a negative relationship with a fundamentalist religion. I'm not talking about fundamentalist religion. I'm talking about something that's not fundamentalist, but still satisfies that drive that appears on a social level. Individuals are different than the social level, but the social level is going to have something. And if you don't get ahead of that, it gets ahead of everybody else. And then where do you end up? Anyways, I have a lot of work to do on that. I should go cook some dinner. I'm going to do some chicken that I cooked a few days ago, and rice. We're going to do a instant pot chicken and rice casserole. Probably not just a casserole, just like chicken and rice with some flavors, spices. Probably use chicken broth, or I'll use chicken broth if there's any in the house for the base. That stock in the rice. I wish I had some parsley or some like a green basil. Parsley probably be good. Cilantro might be interesting. I don't have any of those nice leafy green, very pungent herbs, fresh herbs. So I'm gonna have to make do with what I have. Maybe basil would work. I don't know. Thyme, parsley, sage. You guys are wonderful. I'm going to go. Una gave me the go ahead. Love you, Una. Love everybody else. You guys do good. Make good choices. Look forward to the Blabbermouth threesome with James Lindsay, Vocal Distance, and myself. That hopefully I have a secondary recording, but it's really crappy. So hopefully that'll be up tomorrow. If not, then I have a story of a grad student being canceled, which is really interesting. That will be posted later. A lot of other things going on, and rewriting my book, trying to get that literature thing going on. I am reading this Tocqueville guy. First writer in a while that I just absolutely fell in love with within a couple pages. Just his writing. He's very aristocratic. He's not necessarily of our age at all, but good writer. And how do you have good art without elites? You have to be elitist. Good art requires elitism, but you also have to step out of that elite bubble to actually do something for your community. Hopefully you guys are doing that. Hopefully I'm doing it too. And I'm going to go finish my drink and, cook some dinner. I'll talk to you guys later. Farewell.